Some believe the Democratic Party's next savior resides here, nestled with family, in the relative obscurity of a small city on the shores of Lake Michigan. Pete Buttigieg, the 43-year-old former U.S. Transportation Secretary, is contemplating his future. He is currently in discussions with party officials, labor leaders, and top strategists to decide whether to step into the national spotlight as a candidate in Michigan's U.S. Senate race or aim for a much bigger role as his party's next presidential nominee. Prominent allies argue that Buttigieg cannot realistically pursue both paths. Comparisons to Barack Obama, who was elected president just 4 years after becoming a U.S. senator, are being raised. David Axelrod, Obama's former chief strategist, met briefly with Buttigieg last week ahead of a joint appearance at the University of Chicago. Axelrod stated, "I don't think you can run for Senate in 2026 and run for president in 2028. I would think that would be very, very hard." The Democratic Party may be in a more challenging position now than it was 2 decades ago, when voters turned to that first-term senator from Illinois over more established candidates to lead their comeback from the Bush years. Democrats, demoralized and fearful, are calling for strong new leadership as President Donald Trump and his allies, notably Elon Musk, strive to transform Washington while dismantling key federal agencies. Buttigieg has the potential to lead his party on a national scale if he chooses. More than 4 years after the little-known mayor outperformed more experienced Democrats in the Iowa presidential caucuses, he remains one of the party's best communicators. He boasts a massive social media following, a national donor network, and a Midwestern charm he displays in Fox News Channel interviews and smaller settings alike. Above all, Buttigieg's decision will be guided by the impact on his young family during a challenging cultural moment in Trump's America. The Republican president has targeted LGBTQ initiatives and inclusion programs. Buttigieg is the openly gay father of 3-year-old twins. Axelrod complimented Buttigieg as one of the most talented people in the party, adding that he would be a frontline candidate in any race that he ran. Life in the cherry capital of the world. Buttigieg has lowered his profile since leaving the Biden administration last month. He hasn't participated in any media interviews and declined to speak to the Associated Press for this story. He has only challenged Trump with a handful of social media posts, notably pushing back on the Republican president's blaming of diversity hiring for the deadly mid-air collision at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Democrats seem to appreciate what he has to say based on the response. His posts on X frequently garner millions of views. Just over a week after joining the newer social media platform Blue Sky, he has quickly become one of its most followed Democrats. Buttigieg, a former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, has been more visible around his new home of Traverse City, a lakeside resort town that calls itself the cherry capital of the world. His husband, Chasten Buttigieg, grew up in Traverse City. Lauren Flynn, a local county commissioner, mentioned that Chasten was a speaker at their last Obama dinner and sat at her table. She often receives text messages from folks saying they saw Pete shopping downtown or running by the bay. It's much the same at the local coffee shop, Higher Grounds Trading Co., which features a pride flag out front and progressive messages on the walls. Sydney Hall, a barista at the shop, described it as a low-profile spot where most customers don't disturb the town's highest-profile resident. She noted that she'd served Buttigieg and his husband earlier that day. While the coffee shop may be welcoming, some warn of safety concerns for members of the LGBTQ community and other prominent Democrats in the current political environment. Aaron Wright, president of the Traverse City-based Up North Pride, praised Buttigieg and his family for sacrificing their physical safety for the betterment of their local area, the state, and society. He noted Traverse City is just 20 minutes from where members of a local militia plotted to kidnap Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer. That's the no. One thing that I would imagine they're considering is the physical safety of being where they are, as the people that they are, because people are drinking out of the fire hose of misinformation and disinformation, Wright said. Malignant groups want to see people like me suffer. Wright's husband, Trenton Lee, chair of the local Democratic Party, said his political opponents in local campaigns often focus on his sexuality rather than policies. Pete offers that challenge to the other side, where if you took out his sexual orientation, the way he's able to articulate issues and then actually work on them, he's a shoo-in for whatever he runs for, Lee said. It forces them to be like, the only issue I have is that he's gay. Buttigieg is already facing allegations from some critics that he moved to the state solely to help his political career. Jason Rowe, a Republican strategist and former executive director of the state party, criticized Buttigieg's relocation to Michigan after serving as mayor of South Bend. Rowe described Traverse City as an elite bubble that underscores an elitism perceived as problematic within the Democratic Party. Rowe added that he'll be surprised if Buttigieg enters the race, because if he runs and loses, he could be done. A plum opportunity in a key state. There may be no better staging ground for an ambitious Democrat in 2025 than Michigan. Democratic Senator Gary Peters' unexpected retirement created a rare Senate vacancy ahead of next year's midterms. A Republican hasn't been elected to the U.S. Senate in Michigan this century, although Mike Rogers came within less than 1 percentage point last fall and is planning to run again. Michigan also offers a home state advantage to any prospective presidential candidate in 2028. The state is expected to host one of the nation's opening presidential primaries. And in the general election, Michigan will be a premier swing state. Buttigieg is leaning on powerful allies to help make his decision. Longtime Michigan Senator Debbie Stabenow, who retired in January and considers Buttigieg a close friend, attended his twin's birthday party and visited him at home recently. She said she doesn't expect to endorse in the Senate primary, but told him directly he'd be a very strong candidate. If he announced now, he'd be the front-runner, Stabenow told the Associated Press. He's a Midwesterner, and he talks like a Midwesterner. He's somebody I think people really relate to. Stabenow dared Buttigieg's opponents to try using his limited time in Michigan as a political weapon. We have thousands of people that marry into Michigan every year, she said. We have a great former governor who was born in Canada. If that's the best they've got, great. Buttigieg has recently spoken with labor leaders across Michigan and met with Whitmer and State Senator Mallory McMorrow, a Democrat expected to enter the Senate race soon. Veteran Democratic strategist Liz Smith, a key advisor on Buttigieg's 2020 presidential campaign and a close ally, has also worked with McMorrow in the past, exploring his appeal beyond Michigan. But Buttigieg is also looking beyond Michigan. Former Representative Ani Custer from New Hampshire said she speaks to Buttigieg semi-regularly and recently encouraged him to run for the Senate. Like other Buttigieg allies, she said his young family remains his chief concern as he navigates his options. He's hugely talented, Custer said, and he has a tremendous ability to communicate with the very people that we're missing, the middle of the country, small towns. Whether he runs for the Senate or not, Custer said there are plenty of New Hampshire Democrats who'd welcome him back to the state's high-profile presidential primary in 2028. Buttigieg finished second in New Hampshire during his underdog 2020 presidential bid. Custer pointed to Obama as an example of someone who ran for the Senate and then president a few years later. These are all of the things he and his team are navigating, Custer said. He obviously has a ton of choices.